get into the quarterback stuff. What did you think of Trey Lance's performance? I know you mentioned, the 7 of 11, you thought it was a little up and down. What are some things let's go through? What are some of the things that jumped out to you about his performance that were positive, and what were some of the things that were negative? We can start on either one that you want to go with first.
Yeah, I think we can go with the negative and then focus on the positive to end it.
Okay.
Starting with the negative, one thing we talked about pre-show, Trey Lance was on some plays where he was having to step up in the pocket and having to move around the pocket. Instead of keeping his eyes forward while maneuvering in the pocket, he seemed to have his eyes down, trying to get extra space, trying to make a play before looking up to make that throw after that. And that kind of hindered some plays. I'll talk specifically about a play that I remember. 3rd and 3. George Kittle is the number one route. You're going to him on a stick package. It's a cover 2 look. Kittle's going to be open, and he was coming out of that break. There was pressure from the left side initially that Lance sees. And then while Lance could have done one of 2 things. While the pressure was there, he could have gotten that throw off. And obviously you don't want to take a hit. But I think he could have gotten that throw off. But second, what he did was maybe move a little too soon, moves towards his right. But instead of keeping his eyes on Kittle, who was looking back at the quarterback wide open on that route, he keeps his eyes down for a second too long. By that time, linebackers converge on the Kittle route. And then you have to dump it off to Jeff Wilson Jr., and are unable to convert on 3rd down.
Yeah, that's a good one, and I agree with that play. That's there was definitely pressure coming off the left side, and he has to move. But I think that if he keeps his eyes downfield and he just takes a step to his right, he can make the throw, and he should be able to stick it on Kittle, and that's a first down. Instead,
I think so. Yeah.
Instead he runs a little bit too far, and then he finally gets it to Jeff Wilson Jr. when he really doesn't give him a chance to make a play at that point. I agree with you on that play. What's another one?
Let's talk about the one that Dan Orlovsky broke down. The I forget exactly the down itself, but
it's first and 10, first play of the second possession.
Yeah, 1st and 10, first play of the second possession. This is Lance's only sack of the game. Lance takes a drop back, and then coming out of the drop back, the first route is to Deebo Samuel running this deep crosser because it's a cover. I believe it was a cover 1 look. The safety goes back because Ayuk is the one on the deep route, which means that Samuel's the option on the deep crosser. Samuel's coming out of his break. He isn't necessarily looking at the quarterback yet, but he's wide open. And Lance on his drop back, coming out of that drop back, he looks up. Then he tries to step into the pocket, and then that's another area where he keeps his eyes down just a second while he's stepping up into the pocket, whereas Samuel is open over the middle of the field. And then after that, takes the sack on the play because the offensive line, obviously they had blocked to the outside. The edge rushers can converge in. Burford also, I think Burford was the guy who gave up the main pressure on that play coming into the inside while the outsides were blocked. That's where that sack came from. And instead, Orlovsky was talking about this on Twitter today, and I thought honestly his analysis was correct. When you're doing that, when you're doing the drop back, he said Lance had his drop back too quick, which meant that his hitch was ahead of when the timing was supposed to be. It was a timing thing. If Orlovsky said if Lance has a slower, a more elongated drop back coming into the hitch, then he's able to hit Deebo Samuel in stride, which then creates a big play opportunity for a wide open receiver. I think despite the pressure, there was a free rusher on the play coming from the left side. But I think if Lance goes along, has a slower drop back, a more smooth drop back, let's say, and then comes straight into the hitch, Jalen Moore on the play, the left tackle, he recovers. So the edge had beaten Dwelly on the play, but Jalen Moore recovers and actually blocks the edge on the play, which was a good job by Jalen Moore. Lance then is able to make the hitch and just hit Deebo Samuel in stride. That could have been a big completion.
Yeah, it's just the timing of the throw gets off because there's so much. And that's one of the things with the offense that the 49ers run. And I think it happens in the NFL around the league, not just with the 49ers. But there's so much of what they do that is timing based. And if the quarterback doesn't get the ball out of his hand when it's supposed to get there, everything kind of starts to fall apart around you. And that was a play, and Orlovsky mentions it, and I agree with him. The rhythm of that play is snap, play fake, hitch, throw. And instead you get snap, play fake, hitch, sack.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to continue and say, and that's another thing where I think it's a timing thing where you understand that Lance is going to go through growing pains this year.
Mhm.
That's something where he's going to work through it, and a play that they're definitely going to run. And despite, again, you'll have Trent Williams there, and in a regular setting, I think he gets through it smoother because he understands that his blind side is going to be protected by the best left tackle in football, not necessarily worrying too much about that pressure and instead stepping up and making that throw instead of taking the extra step and then eventually getting sacked.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's another point too, is, with Trent Williams there, he might trust it a little bit more. His eyes might not have kind of peeked that out of the side. He might have been a little bit more comfortable. As I went through the game and watched it, it seemed like there were times when Lance was just kind of rushing some things. It didn't seem like he was really settled last night. I think that was the other thing as well. I'm putting Eric's thing up here because it's right. For Lance, as Bill Walsh would always tell Steve and Joe, footwork, footwork, footwork. It's not going to change overnight. It's going to take time, but that's exactly what it is. And Kyle Shanahan says the same thing. When you ask Kyle Shanahan about quarterback mechanics, his responses always start with the feet. It's all about the feet. It's about the base. And last night on that particular play, it's if he just hits his back foot, because he's got his head turning around before he hits his back foot. You can see him getting his head around. If he picks up that the safety is in the middle of the field, that ball is a hitch and it's a throw. And he gets to that back foot. And I think some of it is his hitch is so much that he's, I wouldn't say happy feet, but his hitch is just so fast and so quick that he can't help but hitch again. And it just starts to slow everything down and he gets sacked.
Yeah, definitely.
I just think he needs to slow down and we'll see how it goes. Was there any others that maybe stood out to you in terms of on the negative side with Trey Lance?
Yeah, so there was the Mystic Kittle where it was a good read. He had good protection and he just missed the throw wide. And normally you don't worry too much. It's one missing completion where you're throwing it wide. But I think you've said it before. I know I've said it before. The one thing about Trey Lance is he's been inconsistent throwing towards the sideline and wide. And while the Kittle route wasn't necessarily on the sideline necessarily, it still was a wide throw. What did you see on that play?
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that was the kind of miss when we were talking earlier in camp and there was all the discussion about how he's working downfield so much and his completion percentage is low because he's pushing the ball so much. And we were talking and I'm like, well, there's a lot of balls that he's missing underneath too. Mm-hmm. And that play in particular was very much like what we saw in camp where he would try to throw short check down routes to receivers and they would be way outside and they're not catchable or they're off of their fingertips. That play to me last night kind of reminded me of a play that I saw on Tuesday where he had Jermichael Hasty in the right flat on an out kind of, away from him. And it was almost exactly the same thing. Where it's just too far extended. And I think Hasty got his fingers on the ball, but he didn't make a catch. And we've just seen this happen a lot. And it's an issue. It's an issue. For me, another one that I would talk about, I think maybe bigger, that's even bigger than that, is you already mentioned the one where he didn't throw it to Kittle. It's the ball to Malik Turner over the middle. That's one where that ball to me is where Trey Lance's throwing motion being longer hurts the rhythm of the offense because the ball comes out later because it just takes that long for him to see it and the ball to finally leave his hand. It takes too long before it happens. And that's why the ball comes out low. It's behind him. And instead of being a catch and a 30-yard gain, it's a catch and a 16-yard gain.
Yeah. And one other thing, like you said, it is a little low behind him. And I wonder, do the 49ers run that play again from that situation? Or do they choose to run it under the gun next time? Or like in shotgun as opposed to under center? Because if you do, Lance is able to at least visualize the receiver, might make that throw a little easier, more comfortable for him. That's something that I'm wondering to see the next time they run it in the regular season. Do they run that play under gun so that they give Lance more comfortability on that throw?
Yeah, that might be part of it too. Changes the timing of it around and stuff. It's a tough one because that receiver that's running the end route is a tight tight split to start with. So it's going to happen quick.
Yeah.
And you've got to get your head around and throw it. And Lance's motion, it's just longer. And it just takes him a little bit. And so by the time he gets it out of his hand, it's behind him, it's low. I felt like he might have been able to lead him, get away with it, because there's where he throws the ball and where the linebacker is, there's a pretty good gap. He probably has about, I don't know about that far, which is about a foot to the right that he could have thrown the ball before it's in the vicinity where the linebacker is going to knock it down. But I don't know if Trey Lance is capable of getting the ball out of his hands any quicker than he did on that play.
And
under center.
And the one other play I want to ask you about, it was the one where Lance faces pressure, rolls out to his left, and as he throws, his arm is hit
Yes.
by a defender. Do you think that that's an issue on Lance because of an elongated throwing motion, or what did you take away from that?
That was a situation where I think Lance should have ran, because here's what we know about Trey Lance, right? We know this because we've been talking about it, and I think people that have really watched Trey Lance know that Trey Lance is not a running quarterback. He is an athletic quarterback that can run, but when he drops back to pass, he wants to pass. On that play, Jalen Moore and Trey Sermon both completely whiff. It's 2nd and 7 right there. The guy's on him too fast. He does a good job. You can't complain about what he does on the play because he's sliding away. He's keeping his eyes downfield. The ball's going to come out to Juwan Jennings is who he's trying to throw. It's just, again, he's not going to just whip the ball. It takes him, he's got to go through the whole twist, and then he's got to bring his hand back here, and then he's got to, it's a whole thing. And so,
hey, Jackhammer quarterback school in session.
On that one, I just felt like that was a play where when he got to the outside, it's 2nd and 7. We brought you here to make plays in this situation where the play breaks down and we need the quarterback's athleticism to make it a positive. And instead of making a positive, he didn't make it a negative because it wasn't an interception, it wasn't a sack. But instead of making a positive yardage play on it and giving you, instead of 3rd and 7, giving you, say, 2nd and 3 or 2nd and 2 by scrambling, even if he just runs to the sidelines, he probably gets 5 yards. That's the only thing with that play. I don't feel like he was wrong. He did a good job moving, but instead of throwing it there, use your athleticism. You're out of the pocket. Use your athleticism. Get some yardage for us. Make it a positive play in that case. That was because then the next play ends up being a 5-yard completion.
Right. I think that's good analysis. And what I'd say to that is I think that changes in the regular season, because obviously the stakes are higher. You're not in a testing phase necessarily. And I'm not saying the 49ers are only using these preseason games to test. They're obviously trying to incorporate real game situations, but I think that in a real game, he would probably look to run that as opposed to try and throw it, because at least a theme to me in this game, which we can talk about play calling in a bit, that second drive when Shanahan had that 6-play 8-yard drive, it seemed like he really wanted just to see, can Trey Lance just let Trey Lance throw the ball? Like in the first and third drives that Lance had, it was a bit of a more balanced attack, which obviously resulted in more offensive movement. In that second drive, you saw a ton of just pure passing. There was, I think, 5 pass plays and 1 run play, or 4 pass plays and 1 run play, or something like that, with 1 scramble included as well. And so I think that changes in the regular season, but good analysis there.
Yeah. I think he could have done it. Just kind of looking through the rest of his game. I mean, the one positive, if you want to get into a positive with Trey Lance,
let's go for it.
He showed the ability to get out of the pocket and make throws on the move to his right. The first play of the game, I thought he ripped that one. I think the first play of the game might have been his best throw of the game. It was the most decisive throw that you saw from him all night long.
And I think we'll add off that, right? I think one thing that is something that I like from Lance is operating out of play action. 49ers are going to use play action a good amount this season, especially with Lance. It just seems to be something he's more comfortable with, being operating out of the pocket, being able to kind of be decisive with his throws. And I think he at the moment, it just seems like sometimes he operates better out of the pocket than in the pocket when he's on the run, when he's, making defenses think about his dual threat ability. And so to me, I thought he worked well out in play action. You talk about that first play where it was off play action to Kyle Juszczyk for a nice 15-yard gain. Some other throws that were minimal throws that I do want to point out. It was the dump over the defensive end on the play actions. I think he's gotten the hang of the touch on those throws. He had an 8-yard one to Dwelly, had a 1-yard one to Juwan Jennings. Sometimes you've seen him be inconsistent with those throws. So it's nice to see that he's working well off play action in a throw like that, because we've seen it with Garoppolo a lot where he goes off play action, hits the streaking tight end. And so if Lance can consistently hit that throw, that's also going to help the offense move.
Yeah. And he did a really good job of doing that. And they're going to use him on the move a bit. That's part of, we've seen them run a lot of play action in camp, a lot of movement, there's a lot more movement. That's one of the things, not only Lance, but you see it with Nate Sudfeld and Brock Purdy. You see that ability. You see more ability to move around. The 49ers quarterbacks 2 years ago were all statues, not just Jimmy Garoppolo, but all of them.
Right.
CJ Beathard for the most part, and Nick Mullins. They've got more athleticism now in the quarterback room. You're seeing them utilize that to a greater extent. There's one play too, and it's I'm going to go to another one. It was real quick. It was the throw to Jennings in the flat. It was 2nd and 4. They run the little jet motion, play action, goes to his right, dumps it over. That was one where that's a good play by Lance. If he's making that throw to Deebo Samuel, that's a first down.
Right.
Definitely.
And I think if he's making that throw to George Kittle, he's going to get a first down as well. I think you could argue that.
Yeah, you're right. That's even another point. I think if it's some of these like Kittle, or because Kittle and Deebo Samuel are the best two with the ball in their hands.
Right.
If they get the ball in their hands in that situation, and you just watch the way that play unfolds. Juwan Jennings just doesn't do a good job of attacking up the field.
He didn't run vertically. He ran a little more horizontally and then turned up the field. But by that time, it's too late. You don't get a good enough gain on that play. I agree.
Yeah, exactly. And then he stops his feet when the guys get close. That's where Deebo Samuel Deebo Samuel or George Kittle. They catch that ball and they're attacking that defender, which is going to get them the yardage that they need. So that's another thing when it comes to it, because that Jennings throw is what led to the Kittle. The one where he misses him. Yeah. So, when I look at the game, there's a lot of growth that Trey Lance needs to make. There's a lot of growth, and I don't think the offensive line was as big of a. Yeah. I'm trying to come up with how to say it, but Trey Lance's issues and the offensive line issues
are separate. Is that what you're trying to say?
They're together. They're together. Trey Lance is creating issues created some issues for himself last night because of the way that the things that he did.
Oh, I get what you mean. Okay.
And the 49ers offensive line created some issues because of the things that they didn't do right. There's there's a relationship. There's some symbiosis between those two. They've got to work together. And in some cases it's Lance. In some cases it's the offensive line. I keep seeing, and I'm seeing it in the comment section here, and I keep seeing it in other places where it's just pounding the offensive line for it. But when you go back and you watch the plays that Lance, the pass plays with Lance, I would say it's probably closer to 50-50 that it's on Lance and on the offensive line than it is on just one or the other.
And it's also a small sample size, so it is sometimes hard to judge, whereas you did see the offensive line falter for the entire game. But the one part that you said about symbiosis, I agree. If you have two different issues, and on one play, you could have one of those two issues arise, but that blows the play up. And so if you're having two places where constant issues are coming from, you're bound to have plays that struggle more than the other. So I think that overall, I think your analysis is correct. There are areas of growth. We've known that with Trey Lance. We saw it in training camp. There are areas where Trey Lance will have to grow. But my takeaway from yesterday was if Trey Lance can run the offense with a less vanilla playbook, or sorry, yeah, with a less vanilla playbook, with the actual Kyle Shanahan playbook that I expect, I still think he's going to be capable of moving this offense well enough for the 49ers to win games when it comes regular season time, when you have your entire team on the field.
Don't disagree with that. I think that once you get the unit all together, it's going to be fine, because we've seen that from Trey Lance on the practice field when he's had his starting offensive line in front of him and he's had his group out there. He's done a very good job. It's just a matter of putting him with everybody. That's one of the reasons. That's why when the title of this show on my picture that I put up with this show, I said time to panic. It's not time to panic, but that's what everybody's going to do, because they got 17 days, and the last thing they're going to remember is the performance in Houston.